Chapter 2. If Pete Brown ain't coming, I ain't coming. Pete Brown by Pete Elman. When Tiger Woods won his first major championship at the 1997 Masters, finishing 12 strokes ahead of runner-up Tom Kite, he was standing on the shoulders of a few men who came before him. One, of course, was Charlie Sifford, the first African-American golfer to play on the PGA Tour. Another was a little-known golfer from Mississippi, born in the middle of the Great Depression 40 years before Tiger, who was the first African-American golfer to win a PGA tournament. He played on the tour for 17 years, and his favorite course was the first golf club in America that was founded, built, owned, and operated by an African-American, Clearview Golf Club in East Canton, Ohio. When he was 19, he was stricken with the mysterious form of polio, but with the help of boxing legend Joe Louis, recovered fully and had a long and fruitful career as a golfer. Along the way, he made hundreds of friends and left behind a legacy of class, character, perseverance, and pride. This is the story of Pete Brown. Pete Brown is barely known by most people, including those folks who you'd think would know him, that is, fellow African-American golfers. The question was posed recently to several, and none had ever heard of him. But he created a legacy for himself in the history of golf and American sport. Pete Brown was the second African-American golfer to play on the PGA Tour. Charlie Sifford was the first. But Brown was the first to win a PGA tournament. In 1963, Pete joined the tour, and in 1964, he became the first African-American golfer to bring home a PGA title when he won the Waco Turner Invitational. In 1970, he earned his second PGA victory at the 1970 Andy Williams San Diego Open at Torrey Pines. He played on the PGA Tour for 17 years and also won 12 other non-PGA tournaments. Brown was born in Port Gibson, Mississippi in 1935, the son of a sharecropper, and grew up in Jackson. He was a caddy in his early years and gave golf lessons to family members as a teenager. Pete developed a love for the sport while working as a caddy, sneaking onto the course whenever he could. After high school, he moved to Detroit to become a pro golfer, but when he was 19, he became sick, mysteriously losing control of his muscles. The doctors could not diagnose the cause. They told me if I did survive, I'd have to give up golf because I'd be in a wheelchair the rest of my life. One day, boxing legend, Detroit native, and recreational golfer Joe Louis, along with established pro Charlie Sifford, visited the hospital to check on Brown. Brown did not recognize them, so Louis left an autographed picture on his bed. The doctor saw that and told me I must be an important guy to have Joe as a friend. Then they started treating me better. Soon a diagnosis was made of non-paralytic polio, and the doctors had plans for his recovery. It was grueling, but Brown was determined, got through it, and was able to play his beloved game again. He moved to Los Angeles, and in July 1963, he received his PGA card. Brown later talked about the influence the Brown Bomber had on the world of golf in the USA during the 1950s and 1960s. He said that Louis gave him the opportunity to play in tournaments that were usually reserved for white people. During that time, the PGA had a clause that allowed only white players to play. But Louis was able to play because they wanted him in the tournament as a draw. They used to call and say they wanted Joe to come to the Pro-Am, Brown said. Joe said he wouldn't come unless other black golfers, including Ted Rhodes and Charlie Sifford, could play. Joe said, if Pete Brown ain't coming, I ain't coming. Since everybody wanted to see the champ, it helped all of the black players. Brown was given the chance to play in tournaments at various private country clubs because he had played on the PGA Tour. When he was inducted into the African American Ethnic Sports Hall of Fame in Harlem, New York in 2007, founder Arif Khatib recalled the event. When I inducted him along with Emil Griffith, Lynette Woodard, E.B. Henderson, Lou Hudson, Willie O'Ree, Wilma Rudolph, Willie Thrower, and John Isaacs, it was the first opportunity for me to meet him in person. We'd had many phone conversations, and I really liked him. When he arrived with his lovely wife, Margaret, and several of his daughters, the hotel became alive. We had a great time from then on until they returned home. Both his PGA wins came down to the wire. Brown won the Waco Turner Open in Bernieville, Oklahoma in 1964 by 1 stroke, and his second PGA win in a playoff at the Andy Williams Open in 1970. He won numerous events outside of the PGA. He was the 4-time USG Negro National Open champion, 4-time Lone Star Open champion, and 3-time North and South champion, and won the 1961 Michigan Open champion in sudden death. His wife, Margaret, recalled that Pete loved to play at the only Black-owned and operated golf club at the time in America, Clearview Golf Club in East Canton, Ohio. Clearview was built by William Powell in 1946 and is the only course designed, built, owned, and operated by an African American. It was named a National Historic Site by the Department of the Interior in 2001 and is managed today by his son, Larry. His daughter, Dr. Renee Powell, is the golf pro there. Renee is the second African American woman to play on a LPGA tour, and as a tour player, she competed in more than 250 professional tournaments and won the 1973 Kelly Springfield Open in Brisbane, Australia. She is also the first woman to compete in a men's tour, and she beat several men in a tournament held in Kenya. In February 2015, Renee Powell became one of several female members and the first and only African American female member of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club in St. Andrews, Scotland. Margaret Brown remembered Clearview. Pete would play at the club and would go fishing in one of the lakes on the property. Mr. Powell said only Pete would be able to fish in the ponds. I would hit balls with him, and one time I made a hole-in-one and won a set of golf clubs, but I didn't keep them and never really got into the game. But I remember how much fun it was to get the hole-in-one. Pete said I could play and tried to show me various ways to hold the club. Margaret was his rock, and she was with him most of the time when he was on the road. It wasn't all fun. Pete was playing in the Michigan Open one year and played well enough to get into a sudden death playoff, she said. So there he was, on the first tee of the playoff, about to hit, and a bunch of guys outside of the ropes hollered, using the N-word, wanting to know what Pete was doing out there where N-words didn't belong. Well, everything was really quiet, and Pete backed away from his shot. Everyone was waiting to see what he was going to do, and Pete just stood there. Then he doubled over laughing. He had himself a belly laugh and shook his head, and the other folks started laughing, and it kind of diffused the situation. So Pete went ahead and hit, and he won it all after trailing by 7 shots. Pete and Margaret are the proud parents of 6 daughters. When he was older, Pete played in the Senior PGA Tour and worked as the head pro at Madden Golf Course in Dayton, Ohio for more than 20 years, retiring in 2004. After suffering 11 strokes and congestive heart failure, he was lured to Evans, Georgia by a longtime friend to get away from the cold Ohio winters. They lived there from 2012 to 2015 when he passed away at the age of 80. Margaret talked about how Pete would hit drives and she would go ahead of him to be close to his golf ball and wait until it finished bouncing and rolling to a stop. By doing this, I could keep people from stepping on or moving the ball, which they would do. That used to happen to him all the time. Pete Brown will be inducted into the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame. The ceremony was originally scheduled for July 30th, 2020, but postponed due to the pandemic situation. Arif Khatib has stayed in touch with Margaret. She told him, "This award means a lot to me, and it would mean a whole lot to Pete. I wish he was here, and I wish he had lived to enjoy this, but it's better late than never." He's looking down, smiling, and saying, "Amen." It's a fair bet to guess that wherever Pete Brown is, nobody is stepping on or moving the ball. The fairways are smooth and wide. His drives are long, straight, and true. The greens are lush with an emerald hue, and the breaks are gentle as he calmly takes the putter from his bag, smiles, and sinks another birdie.